What is going on, guys? Welcome to the first market update on this channel. So let's get straight to the charts. First things first, we have what looks like a confirmed but relatively weak breakout so far from the falling wedge we talked about in our last market update. We need to see some follow through, ideally even a confirmed retest of the upper line of the wedge. Even if you disregard the wedge, this line itself is very important psychological support/resistance. We've been in a continuous downtrend ever since late January, and the downtrend was relatively consistent, forming a straight line down with its peaks. We finally have the first signs of a shift in the trend, starting with the little double bottom we had on the 4-hourly time frame. However, we're not out of the woods just yet. Sometimes these types of breakouts cause a false sense of security. Here is a pretty good example that I remember quite well, where the bears wanted to scare the bulls one last time. Just to be clear, this is not my base case. So the takeaway here is to be very optimistic due to the first signs of strength, but a little bit cautious at the same time until we have full confirmation. Before continuing with my thoughts, let's see what the PowerLaw indicators are showing us. You can see how we're starting to get some reactions off of the bubble projection line. It doesn't even matter if we don't break above this line once, if we can still manage to continue tracking it from the underside. Remember, while Bitcoin's long-term trend follows a steady power law, bubbles typically become exponential during the last year of the 4-year market cycle. Thus, this potential resistance, if it even becomes one, is starting to move at such a rapid pace that Bitcoin doesn't even really need to catch up for a while for very nice average daily gains to start rolling in. In these two market cycles, for example, Bitcoin didn't really catch up right until the finale, when Bitcoin demonstrated what the tail end of an exponential blow off top really looks like. Next to the log graph, nothing new here, still holding above the 25% blue trend deviation line. Will we have some sort of retest of it before moving higher? Here are some examples of that happening, and here is one where we fell short of retesting it. So gambling on this possibility provides a really bad risk to reward ratio now that we are already very close to it. Next to the Bitcoin PowerLaw clock. It is currently 9:53 and Bitcoin is coasting above the average. Notice how we had multiple touch points and held support above it so far. We should start curving up again pretty soon. The cross between the red average and the orange projection line is expected to happen in June. 12 o'clock is a little bit more than 8 months away, which is not that far away if you really think about it, guys. We will all see whether or not this cycle really is different in the coming months. Next to the Detrended Oscillator relative to price. Still hovering in the yellow zone of around 13% discount compared to the median trend. The steepest discount was at around 24% when we reached the camo green area. You can see that we touched this previous resistance turned support zone formed by all the previous chop. It would be highly unusual for the top of this cycle to be in already. Instead, this formation teasing us with a little bit of orange on top looks much more like these three formations over here, where we had to have a little breather before going to the real top. Yes, we have some decay in every consecutive top so far, but even then, this recent top would be really out of place when compared to the rest of the trend. Next to the local Hurst Exponent. As discussed in our last update, Bitcoin found the strength to avoid a reset here for the time being. The best case scenario for the bulls would be to create a prolonged topping process over here. Some of the longer ones have lasted for around half a year or so. However, this requires continued price momentum. Finally, let's see what Minotaur is doing. No new trades on the 15-minute chart. We have just had a little bit of teasing going on here with this wick. If the price action can reach around 86.2k for enough time for the algo to exit, then it will book some nice profits. When looking at my faster paced 5-minute setup, we can see that there has been a long period of sideways stagnation, which didn't really offer enough volatility for the algo to trade one way or another. Now, let's talk about the topic of today. Wow, it's such a ghost town out there. I've noticed such a lack of interest in Bitcoin right now that it's reaching comedic levels, honestly, guys. I can also back this up with data. Let's look at the phrase buy Bitcoin on Google Trends, and it's pretty much at the same levels it was back here, despite Bitcoin being in a continuous uptrend of higher highs and higher lows. What else do we have going for us that we didn't have then? Remember the double, triple top fears we had back then? Well, we obviously confirmed a powerful breakout to all-time highs since then, so we're in a much better position. By the way, guys, check out how crazy Nigeria's level of interest in Bitcoin is. It's at 100 every time I check this chart. So this chart here is the mental trap I wanted to talk to you about, guys. I mean, this is really basic stuff, but why do people always want to buy Bitcoin when it's overvalued and presents the least possible return on investment? But when it corrects a bit, the interest disappears. When you go to the store and see a useful item on a 30% sale, let's say a possible investment in the form of a tool for your business, your interest in buying it does not crater. It rises dramatically because its return on investment potential is much better. So people are much more rational in everyday decisions compared to investing in the markets. Unless, of course, you buy some useless item on sale that you would not have otherwise bought. Another chart illustrating the current sentiment is the Fear and Greed Index. At its worst, it reached such ridiculous levels of fear that the last time we saw these levels was toward the end of the bear market. Imagine having the same emotional response to a 30% bull market correction as you would have after a year-long 80% bear market. All this really shows is how emotion-driven the Bitcoin market really is. The dude who bought at 110k would not have even been able to double his investment in this market cycle, while people who bought during these lows will be able to 3x their money if our projected target of 200k turns out to be true. Now let's get to the news. First up, we've got China. So apparently China is trying to find ways to benefit from crypto while still keeping trading it illegal. Together with senior judges and police, attorneys are debating changes to rules they said will soon change the way confiscated virtual currencies are treated. That could be a game changer for China's crypto industry and comes at a time of heightened Sino-US tensions in Donald Trump's second presidency, coinciding with Trump's plans to deregulate cryptocurrencies and build a Bitcoin reserve. Crypto trading is banned in China, and digital tokens are not recognized as legal tender or assets here. You don't say. But local governments have been using private companies to sell seized digital coins in exchange for cash to replenish public coffers drained by a slowing economy, according to transaction and court documents seen by Reuters. So, essentially, they still want to make money off crypto by selling it overseas or building a reserve for the government without giving its population the associated benefits of owning Bitcoin, such as increased freedom, which is like kryptonite for an authoritarian regime. I mean, what are we even talking about here, guys? China's stance on Bitcoin and crypto is like a metronome at this point. But I think they're starting to find out how much they're falling behind in this field. In other news, we have Ripple CEO Brad Garlinghouse predicting 200k Bitcoin by the end of the year. According to him, the new estimate is higher than his earlier prediction of 175k. He pointed out that the regulatory landscape in the US appears to be changing. According to him, authorities may now be moving from a hostile stance to one that is more supportive of the crypto industry. He also noted that the market sentiment is improving. He believes this optimism, combined with a better regulatory environment, could help Bitcoin's price rise. So guys, it's just my personal opinion, but I'm not a fan of Ripple, because it's pretty much the antithesis of Bitcoin. However, our top predictions line up perfectly. I wonder where he got that number from though. Now let's see what the dollar is doing. This is brutal, guys. All this uncertainty about tariffs and the American economy is really taking a toll on the dollar. If the downtrend continues, it will be great news for Bitcoin. The inverse correlation may not be immediate, but it will most likely materialize for the bulk of the trends, like in previous pivotal Bitcoin up and down trends. Now to the M2 money shift compared to Bitcoin. The liquidity is increasing more and more, yet Bitcoin is still lagging behind by a massive amount. If anything, this growing divergence indicates the amount of dry powder that is being stored up for a corrective move to the upside in the near future. Finally, let's get back to Bitcoin's technicals and the conclusion. We're currently in a quite interesting spot of indecision right now, because at first we got a strong rebound from the 50-week moving average, but then we got rejected by the 20-week moving average, leaving what looks like a doji so far. Things are looking completely fine and normal for a bull market right now, but even if we were to go briefly below it like here, that would just demonstrate a shift in Bitcoin's behavior around moving averages. For example, there used to be a strongly held belief that Bitcoin could never go below the 200-week moving average, even during a bear market. However, then Bitcoin showed the first signs of breaking this pattern by wicking below it. In the next market cycle, Bitcoin smashed through it completely. All this really shows is Bitcoin's decreasing volatility due to it retesting price zones that we already visited in previous market cycles. In conclusion, we're still currently in a great value zone. Try to push negative thoughts out of your mind when looking at your portfolio. Think of it like this. You know how your gains are just unrealized gains when you still haven't sold your Bitcoin at a cycle top. In just the same fashion, any losses during a bull market correction are just temporary unrealized losses. You know what others don't and have the bigger vision in mind. Happy Easter to everybody who celebrates Easter. Here in my country of Estonia, we use onion skins, tea leaves, and other plants to dye eggs for Easter. Here's my son having a great time. If you'd like to see more bonus videos like this one, consider subscribing, liking, and commenting. My mission is to teach people about Bitcoin, and I really appreciate all of your support. This is Saverio speaking, and as always, thanks for watching.